she picked up, and she didn't realize it here in the notes, that this ability to pick up, realists will argue that a light is necessary to illumine the intelligible things, the intellect, the active intellect, or the agent active intellect. Light is a metaphor for describing the ability of the intellect to make illuminate evident essential activities of a thing apart from the accidental. This light, this ability, asks the question, what is it? What does it do? How is it shaped? Intellect asking fundamental questions, what is it? The intellect separates the intelligible essential activity, it's always arose, from the accidents of material conditions, which can change. This power for the intellect is a light. It illumines the species like sunlight illumines a thing. And we call this intellection. The mind forms an image, developed representation from sense data, a phantasm, the 1800s. It's like an image, but more. It's an image, sound, or a memory. It's more than, it's like an image on steroids. That's how I think of it.
Yeah.
So the term universal directly and necessarily relates to the nature or form of things. Thomas Aquinas, the concept, the essential activity of the thing is efficiently caused by the mind. The mind puts it together, but the formal cause or shape is the thing itself. Mind participates, it works with the thing in the thing to arrive at a better understanding of the thing, a concept by which the thing is known. But the concept is a borrowed thing. It will always be incomplete, though important.
Right.
And some will call this participation theory of knowledge. Adam knew the animals in a particular way that the animals themselves did not, which Sarah was speaking of very clearly. And therefore, Adam was able to name them. Right. He could see in their nature, their form, their essence, the concept that by which something is known.
You know, and it is interesting in regards to that, as you find out, but because you can see the insidiousness of Satan, who again is non-creative, right? He cannot come up with anything new. All that he can do is corrupt what was already there. And so if we recognize inherently that Adam could name the animals, but the animals could not name Adam, right?
Right.
Recognize that inherently, that man recognizes within himself this ability to do just that, right? But the gravity of the matter and of the subject of what we're actually talking about now, the gravity of man's ability to name is not his ability to do that, right? Because we were talking about potency. It is, in fact, the active element of what is named, right? What is already present. But man now, it appears to me, and anybody who's a philosopher might be able to correct this, but it seems as though man now is grasping at the power of the potency, right? So he wants to take the power to name without having any agency to do so, right? The potential to name, he is using that sufficiently to corrupt his will, to make himself what he isn't, and to say that that name is as valid as the active potency of naming, which Adam can do, and because there has to be that otherness has to exist before it can be named, right?
That's
and
right.
We've already said the essence of what a man is or what an animal is God's thumbprint on nature itself, so that God can be known through his creation. But now these men, these true voluntarists, these true nominalists, want to remove the essence from themselves, that thumbprint of God, and they want to call that something other. But that is the one thing that they can't do. Adam could never have called himself Eve.
That's correct.
Right? Because his essence forbids it. The footprint of God, that thumbprint of God on his soul, his essence, forbids it. But we are entering into an age of mass psychosis where the intellect The will precedes the intellect. We are ignoring the light, and we are simply grasping for what we want, even though we don't have the agency, as it were, to do that. We only have the potency to name, right? The potentiality to name. And Satan, recognizing that he cannot offer us anything new, is corrupting our ability to name by having us, instead of naming something outside of ourselves, by demanding the authority to name our essence.
That's right. And Sarah did a beautiful job of expounding on what is known as intellection theory. Intellection theory it hinges on two things, and she was rightly pointing out. The first is that species communicates both material conditions and intelligible conditions of a thing to the rest of reality. It's like a gift. So this other thing is telling us what its material is and what its form is. But the second part is only rational human beings, have been specifically, if you will, tuned, like a radio wave, like the radio is tuned to the radio waves around it, or a particular instrument can pick up the thing that you're trying to measure. Human beings are able to perceive and understand the essential activities or forms of things, including itself. The mind is tuned to the knowledge of essential activities and not just images. And it's true for all kind of all things of its kind. And the mind is particularly adept at this work through the intellect. Carpenter imposes an intelligibility of order onto the wood. Right. Nature imposes an intelligibility of form onto the acorn, which will potentially, that Sarah was using, generate an oak tree. William of
house from an acorn, right?
That's right.
No matter how hard you try, you'll never build a house from an acorn because it's only potentiality. And that's, that is potency is very different from agency. We possess both because God is generous to us. Right?
That's right. And William of Ockham got rid of both of these elements, the intelligibility of a thing and the rationality of it. There is no unique capacity of the intellect to abstract or discriminate between essential and accidental activity. It's not necessary. And so as a result, there would be no species, no causal relationship between knowledge of a thing and the thing itself. And we cut out that process by which intelligible conditions of the species becomes evident or known. That was what I called intellection. So for the nominalist, knowledge begins in the person with the senses. And nominalists, that was Rosalind, Abelard, Ockham, of course. And they were, and others, attractive by its simplicity. They were tired of scholastic, what they thought mental gymnastics. Simple, insufficient, and dangerous because it was insufficient. Voluntarist moral system developed from nominalism. Because there's no real connection between the concept and a thing, between universal terms, it's just empty wind, sound, mind putting common characteristics together. And
like most men who posit different theories like this, because I would bring it to, in the modern era, to I've forgotten his name. He's one of the big atheists in England right now, who for years and years and years has said that God doesn't exist, right? That he wrote The God Delusion, if you remember who was the author of The God Delusion. But now, as he's watching this corruption of the world, right? He's beginning to recognize that they're actually Richard Dawkins. He's beginning to recognize that there is actually something to the restraining power of a deity that can punish you, in the same way that there is a restraining power of a closed circuit television that prevents people from committing crime, right? And now, after all of these years of his fighting against God itself, right? God as a loving human person, he's finding it necessary to cling to any authoritarian entity that can punish someone eternally as a restraining hand on what we would be calling voluntarism, right? The desire of man to use his will over his intellect, because that is the corruption of the talents that a man has been given. One is supposed to have primacy of place, and Satan, who is the great sunderer, right, has sundered intellect and will and reversed them in the mind of the modernist. That man has authority over nature, as opposed to having not authority over it, but an ability to work within it.
That's right.
And I would say that goes back to the fact that no matter how hard a man tries, God will never permit the essence to be changed.
Yes, because man doesn't have that. He doesn't have. I hate to use the word power, because then we're back to this notion of will.
Right.
You just aren't God.
Right. He's not the mover.
He is not the mover. That's right.
Well, I mean, he's not the unmoved mover. He's not the one who sets the ball in force, right? I mean, and we know that. I mean, man can become aware, and a lot of times Thomas Aquinas would move away from the supernatural back into the natural, right? So that he could give insufficient examples, but examples that could allow the intellect to extrapolate information from it, right? Grace, he would say, is perfected by nature, right? There's the perfection of nature, as it were, right? And so you could say something like, to not have agency or power over something is that man could use that abstractive power of himself, as Newton did when he saw the apple fall and recognized that the apple didn't float, right? So that there was something that he could not see that was operating on the apple that made it go down, right? Now, man has become, shall we say, powerful enough or intuitive enough or intelligent enough that we can defeat Earth's gravity, right? But not by himself alone. Man has had the necessity of requiring all of the material goods that God has given us, and then we assemble it into a rocket. And the rocket is able to, all of these things that we have assembled through our intellect and our will, right? Using our intellect appropriately to create what we wish to do, which is to defeat gravity. But man by himself, he can jump as high as he wants, right? He can do whatever he wants. He can jump out of the Eiffel Tower, right? He can jump out of an airplane if he wants to, thinking that he's going to be able to soar. But outside of the use of other things that God has provided, other materials, right? Of his own essence, God has not permitted man to defeat gravity. Gravity will always defeat the essence of man, because God has willed that gravity holds man firmly on the ground, so that he recognizes that he is not an angelic being, right? That great mythology of Icarus and Daedalus, right? This belief that they, by their own nature, could soar and become divine, is shown to us over and over again, that the essence is God within us. He says who we are, and then he permits us, he gives, wow, I mean, look at the latitude that God gives us. He did give us the intellect and the will to be able to create a rocket so that we could go to outer space and look at ourselves from the view of the heavens to see how small we are, perhaps, right? We thought we were so big, and then we looked at what we were, and oh my goodness, we're not as big as we thought, right? We can't even see man from outer space. And I think the only structure that we can technically see maybe is the Great Wall of China, right? So I think that we have to make sure that we are recognizing that one of the primary modern problems that we are seeing right now with this theory of modernism, with this theory of voluntarism, is an innate attempt by Satan to have man take authority over something that where God says you may not go there.
That's right. That's right. Very good, very good. We will pick up here the next time, my friends. Till the next time, Fides et Ratio.